นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ I have to speak to you in English เข้าใจไหมต้องอาตมาต้องแสดงธรรมภาษาอังกฤษเพราะผู้ภาษาไทยไม่ค่อยเก่งนะไม่ทราบว่าญาติโยมจะเข้าใจหรือเปล่าแต่ว่าต้องพยายามต้องอดทนนะ I can well remember when I first came to Wat Pa Pong, and I hadn't been here more than a few days, and we had to go to Tham Sang Phet, to Wat Tham Sang Phet, because the big sala had been built and was being offered. So we had to go there for this ceremony. And I was quite new to Thailand. I spoke no Thai. I couldn't understand a word of what was going on around me. And I had to sit up with everyone else for 3 nights in a row, listening to Dhamma Desanas. I didn't understand a word. And for many years, really, this is what happened to me. I had to sit through long hours of Dhamma Desana, conversations, all sorts, in a language I couldn't understand. And it was said to me that this was good for me, that this was teaching me patience, endurance. And I never thought that I would be in the position now of speaking to you in English and putting you through the same kind of torment. But there we are. They said that a lot of people here would understand English. I don't know whether that's true, but I hope you do, because otherwise what I say isn't going to be of a great deal of use. But I'm told the idea tonight is that some of the talks will be in Thai and alternate talks will be in English for those who don't know Thai but who do understand English. So there we go. เข้าใจไหม Some people do. So this is always a special time for me. I determined years ago that I would come to these events every year, although I normally live in England. In fact, I spend all my time there. I've spent 30 pansa in the same Wat in England. But I come every year to Thailand. I come every year in January to attend these events. And it's very important to me that I come to them, because they're very remarkable. And really and truly, every year gets more and more extraordinary, more and more amazing. To see so many people here, so many people this afternoon in that, watching that procession, so many people and so many monks in the procession, going out there to honor Luang Por Cha. And I often reflect that, people come together in large numbers to do quite unskillful and horrible things, quite often. But they don't very often do that. They don't very often come together in large numbers for something good, and really good. And certainly not to honor the triple gem, the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, and certainly not to honor a Buddhist monk from a very humble background. But that's what we've done today. That's what we're here for, to honor a very remarkable man who grew up in very humble and quite poor circumstances. I sometimes think, I don't think I've done very much myself in my life. I'm getting a bit old now, and I look back sometimes and I think, well, I don't really feel I've achieved very much in my life, but I have had the opportunity to know some very extraordinary people, and some of them very famous. Before I came here, I was living a very different life. I was living a very sort of refined existence in a way as an actor. I was a member of the National Theatre Company in England, and rubbing shoulders with some very famous people. And then I came here, and I met Luang Por Chah. I came to Thailand, and when I arrived in Bangkok, I met someone, an old friend in fact, who said to me, if you want to be a real monk, there's only one place to go, Wat Pa Pong. So what could I do? I had to come here. And I met Luang Por Chah. So I've had this great opportunity to meet and know and work with some very unusual, some very remarkable, and in many cases very, very famous people. And most of those people, the famous ones that I used to know, have died, or they're very elderly, but those who've died have quickly been forgotten, except Luang Por Chah. Luang Por Chah, it's a long time now since he was active. It must be probably about 35 years or more since he was really active, and more than that, since he was at his best. He didn't speak for 10 years before his passing. And it's been, I think, 24 years since he passed away. But far from being forgotten, his memory, his name, his fame has grown. And he's had a huge effect, an amazing influence on many, many people throughout the world. That's an extraordinary achievement, coming from this very humble background. When I came here when did I come here? I came here right at the beginning of 1972. And Bangor and the path out there and the road to Bangor, it was all very simple and very primitive, not many cars, very, very different from what it is now. This was a very remote part of the world. I was talking with someone earlier, and I happened to say that I have a collection of letters that I wrote to my parents. In those days we didn't have a phone. I expect almost everyone here has a mobile phone now. But in those days we didn't have mobile phones. The Watts didn't have a phone at all. I remember being a Wat Kern, and we wanted to invite Luang Por. So we had to get a boat across the lake, we had to flag down a song tau, we had to eventually get another vehicle. It took half the day to get here. We spent a bit of time inviting Luang Por to come to Wat Kern, and then we had to repeat the whole process back. All day it took us to make that simple invitation, which now you would do very quickly and very easily, picking up a phone. It was a very different time then. We wrote letters occasionally. Luang Por Chah didn't like us writing letters, so I had to have permission to write home once every 6 weeks. He didn't like us reading. Wasn't really a great problem because we didn't have any books in English, so there wasn't much to read. I was so hungry for reading that, there was a fashion at the time for people to wear shirts and things with bits of print, newsprint, printed on them. And I remember on Bindapat seeing these people putting food in my bowl, and I was so hungry to read something, I was reading the bits of newsprint printed on their garments. So it wasn't much of a problem not reading, because we didn't have anything to read. But it was a very, very different time, a much simpler, and in many ways I think a much nicer time. I look back on early times in my life, in England too, and it was all much nicer in so many respects, much simpler, in some ways much harder, but somehow more attractive, I feel. And I don't think it's just nostalgia. I think it's true. I think it was a more attractive time. Anyway, this was the world that Luang Por Chah grew up in. And in this remote part, from this remote part of the world, his message has gone out all over the planet, in many languages, translated now into many languages. And he continues to affect people all this long time after, and it will go on, because people read his books, they listen to him, there's all sorts of stuff about him on the internet. He's one of the most famous men ever to come out of Thailand, from this very humble background. And people often remark, and they question how it could have been that Luang Por Chah had this kind of success. How did he have this sort of success with Farang when he spoke no English? How did we learn anything from him, people ask sometimes. Sometimes I think people think it was a kind of magic he had, that somehow he could speak and we all understood. Well, it wasn't quite like that. But he did have a sort of magic. And it was a bit hard to pin down. But I think, when I think back on him, for one thing, he really lived the Dhamma. He didn't just sort of learn it or turn it on now and then. He lived it. It was there with him all the time. And he never lost an opportunity to express it and to teach it. I remember one day coming back from Pindapat with him and walking with him around the Wat. He used to like to, once the bowls had been taken from us, and he'd come into the Wat, and he used to like to sort of prowl around the back paths by himself, or perhaps with one monk attending him, just having a look how things were, what the state of the Wat was, and so on. And I was with him one day, just him and I can't remember where it was now, but I think it was somewhere over there, that we were wandering around along this path, and there was a great big branch had fallen across the path, or into the path. And he motioned to me to get hold of one end of it, and he got hold of the other end, and we picked it up, and we held it for a minute, for a second probably, and he looked at me, and he said to me, he said, "Is this heavy?" And then as we threw it, "Now is it heavy?" That is profound Dhamma. While you're holding on to something, while you're attached to something, it's heavy, it's a problem, it's difficult. But when you can let it go, when you can throw it away, then, of course, it's not heavy. It's gone. You've let it go. And those words, "let go," he became famous for, talking about it all the time. Talking about letting go of everything. That's hard. People think, well, could we just let go of this or that or a little bit? No. You've got to let go of it all. And he would talk in these very practical terms with people. And I believe that was part of his gift, his success. That living the Dhamma all the time. He also had enormous metta, loving kindness. I don't remember him teaching a practice of metta bhavana. I don't remember him talking about actually cultivating it. but he had it. And he could get away with all sorts of telling off of people, because he wasn't a very easy person sometimes to be with, I can tell you. And I caught the wrong end of his tongue on a few occasions, quite severe. But you see, I'd been used to a disciplined life, and I'd been used to criticism. That is how we were trained as actors. So it didn't bother me particularly. That seemed to me just how you did things. I still think that way, but the world has changed a bit, and people don't like to be criticized now, and you have to praise them. But he didn't do that much. He mostly criticized, and particularly me. So he wasn't very easy to live with, but he could get away with it. Because I think of this tremendous this wellspring of loving kindness. And he lived by principles. He was a very principled person. He lived by the principles of Dhamma. And never mind what people thought, never mind how inconvenient it might be, he kept to those principles. Now this is an important message, because we live in an age of personalities, when people admire personalities. And that's dangerous, because inevitably personalities, people, make mistakes and are often great disappointments to us. Principles, secure, true principles, are always with us. And to live a principled life is a powerful life. It's the only way. And it may mean sometimes that what you do or what you want to do or what you require is inconvenient. But never mind. Never mind. It's important you live by those principles. Buddha Dhamma contains many principles. I mean, essentially, there is that of truth. But then think about, in practical terms, what it teaches you, what it demands of you, what it gives you to help you live your life in a reasonable and happy way. Think about the precepts, for example. Precepts are often inconvenient. The fifth precept. People break the fifth precept all the time. Buddhists, people who are devoted, they say, to Buddhism, don't keep that fifth precept often. I don't know how much you know about me, but in England I spend a great deal of time teaching Buddhism in the prisons. In England we have something like 140 prisons. And for the last how many? Over 30 years now, 35 years or something, I've been teaching Buddhism in the prisons. Actually, it's nearly 40 years. I've been teaching Buddhism in the prisons. And I run a group, an organization called Anguliman, the Buddhist Prison Chaplaincy. And I have a team of nearly 50 people who help me, who go into the prisons as Buddhist prison chaplains. And every so often I have to interview people who want to be a Buddhist prison chaplain. And they have to fill in a form. And then I interview them. And on that form it asks them about the precepts. And I'm particularly fussy about the fifth precept, because apart from anything else, an awful lot of the people we have in prison are there for alcohol and drug-related offences. And do you know, so many people who come to me who will say that they've been devout Buddhists for the last 20 years or 25 years or something, when it comes to being questioned about the fifth precept, admit that, well, they don't really keep it. They'll say things like, well, I just have the occasional beer, the occasional glass of wine, and so on, but actually that means they're not keeping it. And I know that there are many Buddhist people who break the precept pretty much and often. And it's inconvenient, they will tell me, to keep that precept. You know, your boss demands it of you. Society requires it of you. Relating to your friends or customers demands that you have a drink, that you go out with people, that you have dinner with them, and there should be wine on the table, and all of that. It's inconvenient, so break it. Well, that's not the way at all. Keeping the precepts, keeping to principles is often inconvenient, but it is necessary if you really want to improve yourself and you want to live a reasonable life. For us too, keeping our precepts is often inconvenient. Eating one meal a day is often inconvenient. Eating from the bowl is inconvenient. I think when Luang Por Chah when he was made a Chao Kun, and he went to the palace and he took his bowl with him, and other monks criticized him. It was terrible, because it was inconvenient. But you know, you have to be true to principles. Principles are important, and then you have a strength, you have a power. And Luang Por Chah had that power because he remained true to what he believed in, true to what the Buddha taught. And however inconvenient it was, look what's happened. Look at how his influence has blossomed and reached into the farthest corners of the world and affected so many people. I've been, during the time that I've been going in the prisons over the years, I've been distributing the books of translations of his talks. And the way it happens in the prisons is that, you know, people have a book and then they get moved to another jail and they leave the book behind them, or they forget it, or they lend it to a friend. And these sort of, the things you take in and give them sort of kind of get absorbed into the prisons. And then they reappear sometimes. So I've had men come up to me occasionally and with a Luang Por Chah book. And they've said to me, and they don't know that I knew him or that I had any part in bringing those books into the prison. And they say to me, this is amazing. This is amazing. There, they've read that book. Those words of Luang Por Chah spoken all that long time ago here or somewhere like it. And they've been deeply affected by what he had to say, by his message. And I also believe by his integrity. So these are the sort of lessons I feel we need to learn from him when we contemplate him, when we think about him. His integrity, his absolute commitment to what he was doing. And also, I think too, his simplicity. He didn't complicate things. His approach to teaching the Vinaya, for example, monastic discipline. You know, we didn't have texts, we didn't have much to read about the Vinaya. We didn't know all the complexities. We weren't sort of lawyers. Nowadays, I sometimes think that some of the younger monks, well, they almost have a PhD in the intricacies of the Vinaya. We didn't have any of that. There was a simple direct approach, and it was practical, and it worked. There's always the criticism that our way of life is old-fashioned, out of date. We should modernize. When we went to England, I was so proud today, I was very, very pleased when I was walking around in the procession, and I could hear someone, I don't know who it was, on the on the microphone, and I heard those words coming over the loudspeaker, my name mentioned, and then it was said that I was Luang Por Cha's Upatak when he went to England. I was so pleased when I heard that. I was really quite proud of that. And that was a marvelous time, I can tell you. Because, you see, with him, it was very difficult here to get close to him. There was always so much going on, so many people around him, and you could very rarely get him alone. But then when we went to England, I had a lot of time with him, and that was marvelous. That was a really rather special time for me. I've forgotten now what I was going to say about him. But yeah. Anyway, doesn't matter. But I'm so sorry I can't speak to you in Thai and tell you all this in Thai, but it was a very, very grand time with him. I better not go on too long because they've got about 20 odd people to get through until 6 o'clock in the morning, and you'll be wanting most of you to listen to your own language, so I won't go on too long now. Anyway, thank you all very much for tolerating me, and my thanks to you all for being here and honouring this remarkable person. And I hope you all will benefit and do your best. Now this is important, This is something you have to do. We all have to do it. If we want to make our lives better, if we want to make things better, we have to do it for ourselves. You can't just say, oh, Luang Por Cha was marvellous, and read all the stuff and then do nothing. You have to do it. It's often the case. You have a marvellous medicine and then you worship it and you don't take it. Well, that won't do you much good. So you have the words of and example of Luang Por Cha. Now try to live up to it. And I think monks as well also should try to live up to it. I remember what I was going to say now. When we went to England, a quite famous Buddhist gentleman, a very eccentric man, came to see us. High Court judge he was. And he said to us, he came to see Luang Por Cha, and he said to us that, we should do things, that we should be modern, and do things, we should be upgrade things and do things differently, and look after ourselves and pay our own bus fares and cook and all that sort of stuff. In other words, break the linear, be different. I've never seen Luang Por Cha look so bored as he listened to him. But those sort of pressures are there on us, and it's very important that they're resisted, because people don't realize the importance of keeping the Vinaya and keeping that special relationship between the lay people and the Sangha. What are we? We're what we do. That's what we are. We're not just what we say, it's what we do. Luang Por Cha did it. He practiced it. And for all of us, if we want to be really Luksits of him, we should do our best to do as he did. To keep life reasonably simple, to be aware of our defilements, and do our best to challenge them and cleanse our minds of those things. And you know, I'll finish with this now, but whenever I give a Dhammadesana, I always remember that he once said that none of his Luksits gave good Dhammadesanas. They just express kilate. So I'm sorry if I've been doing that, but I do hope that something that I've said will be of use. May you all be well and happy and in time free from suffering.
สาธุ เตรียมตัวครับก็ที่แสดงธรรมจบลงไปก็หลวงพ่อเจ้าคุณภาวนาพิเทศท่านกลับไปอยู่ประเทศอังกฤษก็แต่ก่อนก็พูดได้แต่ต่อกลับไปอยู่บ้านก็เลยลืมก็ดีแหละมีจดหมายหลวงพ่อเจ้าคุณบอกว่าไม่ต้องแปลภาษาใครภาษามันเลย